They called her delusional. They said she was walking into a slaughter. In the high-stakes world of New York divorce courts, you don't represent yourself against a shark like Bruno Sterling, especially when he's hired the deadliest lawyer in the city. Everyone in Department 42 expected a massacre. They expected Jessica Sterling to cry, sign the papers, and disappear into poverty. Bruno certainly did. He even laughed out loud when she stood up. But he forgot one thing. The person who builds the empire knows exactly where the bodies are buried. What happened over the next 3 days didn't just silence his laughter. It stunned the entire legal system and exposed a secret so dark the judge threatened to have everyone arrested. This is the story of the wife who played the fool, only to checkmate the king. The laughter wasn't subtle. It was a rich, throaty sound that bounced off the mahogany walls of the Superior Court of New York, Department 42. It was the sound of a man who had never lost a day in his life. Bruno Sterling leaned back in his Italian leather chair, smoothing the lapel of his $3,000 charcoal suit. He turned to his attorney, Silas Blackwood, a man known in legal circles as the Butcher of Broadway, and whispered loud enough for half the room to hear. "Look at her, Silas. She's wearing that dress I bought her for a charity gala 5 years ago. It's pathetic. She thinks she's in a movie." Silas Blackwood, a man with silver hair and eyes like chipped flint, didn't laugh. He just smirked, tapping his gold fountain pen against the heavy oak table. "Let her play pretend, Bruno. It makes the kill easier. Judge Henderson hates time wasters. She'll be held in contempt before lunch." Across the aisle at the plaintiff's table sat Jessica Sterling. She looked small. The courtroom air conditioning was blasting, and she shivered slightly. Unlike the defense table, which was cluttered with paralegals, laptops, and stacks of bound evidence, Jessica's table was empty, save for a single yellow legal pad and a plastic cup of water. She kept her head down, her brown hair pulled back in a severe, sensible bun. To the casual observer, she looked like a defeated woman, a housewife who had been traded in for a newer model, specifically Bruno's 24-year-old personal assistant, Tiffany. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. The heavy door behind the bench swung open, and the Honorable Judge William P. Henderson swept into the room. Henderson was an old-school jurist. He had zero patience for theatrics, and even less for incompetence. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the docket. Case number 49 Tisto. Sterling v. Sterling. Judge Henderson grumbled. "We are here for the final hearing on asset division and spousal support. Appearances." Silas Blackwood stood up smoothly, buttoning his jacket. Silas Blackwood representing the respondent, Mr. Bruno Sterling. "Your Honor." The judge looked to the other table. "And for the petitioner," Jessica stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor, a harsh noise in the quiet room. Bruno chuckled again, covering his mouth with a well-manicured hand. "Jessica Sterling, Your Honor," she said. Her voice was soft, trembling slightly. "Representing myself." Judge Henderson peered over his spectacles. He sighed, a long, weary exhale that signaled he was already dreading this trial. "Mrs. Sterling, I am going to ask you this once, and I want you to listen carefully. Your husband is the CEO of Sterling Dynamics. The marital assets in question are estimated in the tens of millions. Mr. Blackwood here has been practicing law for 30 years. Are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed? You are bringing a knife to a nuclear war, madam." I can't afford an attorney, Your Honor," Jessica said, looking down at her hands. "Mr. Sterling cut off my access to the joint accounts 6 months ago." Silas Blackwood shot up. "Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Sterling merely secured the assets to prevent frivolous spending. We offered Mrs. Sterling a generous settlement of $50,000 to cover her transition. She refused it out of spite." $50,000? The judge raised an eyebrow. "For an estate of this size? It's more than she came into the marriage with," Silas said smoothly. "She was a waitress when they met." "Your Honor, she has no financial literacy. We are trying to protect the estate." "I see," the judge said. He looked at Jessica. "Mrs. Sterling, I strongly advise you to reconsider the settlement. If you proceed, you will be held to the same standards as a practicing attorney. I will not hold your hand." If you fail to object, evidence gets in. If you fail to file the right motions, you lose. Do you understand? Jessica looked up. For a split second, the fear in her eyes seemed to vanish, replaced by something colder, something harder. But it was gone so fast. Bruno missed it. I understand, Your Honor, she said. I'm ready. Bruno leaned over to Silas. Watch this, she's going to cry in 10 minutes. Mr. Blackwood, your opening statement, the judge ordered. Silas Blackwood walked to the center of the room. He didn't use notes, he was a performer. Your Honor, Silas began, his voice baritone and trustworthy. This case is simple. It is a tragedy, yes, but a simple one. Bruno Sterling is a visionary. He built Sterling Dynamics from a garage startup into a global logistics empire. He worked 18-hour days. He missed holidays. He sacrificed everything for the success of the family. Silas gestured accusingly at Jessica. And what did his wife do? She stayed home. She attended luncheons. She spent his money. And now that the marriage has unfortunately broken down due to irreconcilable differences, she wants half. She wants to dismantle a company that employs thousands of people, just to fund a lifestyle she did nothing to earn. We will prove that a prenuptial agreement exists, one that she claims to have lost, and that her contributions to the marriage were negligible. We ask the court to limit support to the statutory minimum and grant Mr. Sterling full retention of the company shares. He sat down. It was a strong, standard opening. It painted Bruno as the hard-working hero and Jessica as the leech. Mrs. Sterling, the judge said, your opening statement. Keep it brief. Jessica walked around the table. She didn't go to the podium. She stood awkwardly in the middle of the aisle. She held her yellow notepad against her chest like a shield. My husband, Bruno, she started, her voice shaking. He says I did nothing. He says I was just a waitress. That is true. I was a waitress at the Blue Diner on 4th Street when we met. Bruno rolled his eyes. Here comes the sob story, he thought. But Jessica continued, taking a breath. The law in this state speaks of a partnership. It speaks of good faith. Bruno is asking you to believe that he built Sterling Dynamics alone. He is asking you to believe that the $50 million in the Vanguard Trust doesn't exist. The room went dead silent. Silas Blackwood's head snapped up. Bruno froze. The what trust? Judge Henderson asked, leaning forward. The Vanguard Trust, Your Honor, Jessica said, her voice stabilizing. And the shell company in the Cayman Islands, registered as Blue Ocean Holdings, and the 3 commercial properties in Seattle purchased under the name of his driver, Thomas Miller. Bruno's face went from smug to purple in the span of 3 seconds. He slammed his hand on the table. That's a lie. She's lying. Mr. Sterling, sit down, the judge barked. He turned his gaze to Jessica. The pity was gone, replaced by sharp interest. Mrs. Sterling, those are serious allegations. Alleging hidden assets without proof is a quick way to get your case dismissed and pay the other side's legal fees. I know, Your Honor, Jessica said. She walked back to her table and picked up a single document. I don't have a law degree, but I do have the invoices, and I have the bank transfer records. She handed a paper to the bailiff. Marks as Exhibit A, she said softly. Silas Blackwood snatched the copy from the bailiff's hand. His smirk disappeared. His face went white. Bruno grabbed the paper from him, his hands shaking. It was a wire transfer receipt, $2.3 million, from Sterling Dynamics operating account to Blue Ocean Holdings, LLC. Dated 8 months ago. Signed by Bruno Sterling. Your Honor, Jessica said, her voice gaining strength, my husband has been hiding assets for over a year. He didn't just cut me off from the joint accounts. He systematically moved our marital property into untraceable offshore holdings. I have 47 pages of documentation, bank statements, property deeds, corporate filings, all of it purchased with money earned during our marriage. Judge Henderson leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Mr. Blackwood, care to explain? Silas was flipping through his own files. Frantic. Your Honor, I was not made aware of these accounts. This is the first I'm hearing of any Cayman holdings. Is that so? The judge said dryly. He looked at Bruno. Mr. Sterling, did you disclose all marital assets in your financial affidavit as required by law? Bruno's mouth opened and closed. He looked like a fish pulled from water. Are those business accounts, Your Honor? They're not marital, they're corporate. Corporate structures for tax purposes. Tax purposes, the judge repeated, his voice flat. He turned to Jessica. Mrs. Sterling, do you have evidence that these funds originated from marital assets? Jessica nodded. She reached into her bag. Not a designer purse, but a simple canvas tote, and pulled out a thick manila folder. She handed it to the bailiff. Exhibit B through Z, Your Honor, she said. Forensic accounting reports. Mr. Sterling transferred $18 million from our joint investment account into Sterling Dynamics over the last 18 months. Then he moved that money, in smaller increments, into offshore LLCs. He thought if he laundered it through the company first, it would look like business income. But every dollar has a paper trail. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Silas Blackwood looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Bruno Sterling sat frozen, his carefully constructed empire collapsing in real time. Judge Henderson banged his gavel. Order! Order in this court! He looked at Bruno with undisguised contempt. Mr. Sterling, you are aware that hiding assets in a divorce proceeding is not only grounds for sanctions, but also constitutes fraud upon the court, which is a criminal offense? Bruno's lawyer stood up, his voice shaking. Your Honor, if I may, I would like to request a recess to confer with my client and review these documents. Denied, the judge snapped. You should have reviewed them before you walked into my courtroom claiming your client was being generous with a $50,000 offer. Henderson turned to Jessica. Mrs. Sterling, I am going to ask you directly. How did you obtain this information? Jessica took a breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for. Your Honor, she said, I didn't just obtain it. I created it. For the last 10 years, I have been the bookkeeper for Sterling Dynamics. I processed every invoice. I reconciled every bank statement. I filed every corporate tax return. My husband trusted me with the numbers because he thought I was too stupid to understand what they meant. She looked directly at Bruno. Her eyes were no longer afraid. They were sharp, cold, and unforgiving. But I understood, Bruno. I understood every shell company you created, every fake consultant you paid, every dollar you skimmed. I've been watching you for 3 years, ever since I found the text between you and Tiffany. I knew this day was coming, so I made copies. I documented everything. Bruno shot to his feet, his face a mask of rage and panic. You had no right. Those are confidential company files. That's corporate espionage. It's marital property, Jessica said calmly. And I'm a 50% owner of Sterling Dynamics, whether you like it or not. I had every right. Judge Henderson was no longer bored. He was leaning forward, fully engaged. Mrs. Sterling, you're claiming you're an owner of the company? Yes, Your Honor, Jessica said. She pulled out another document. Exhibit AA, the original incorporation papers for Sterling Dynamics, filed 12 years ago. The company was registered as a partnership, 50% Bruno Sterling, 50% Jessica Sterling. My husband seems to have forgotten that detail. Silas Blackwood grabbed the document from the bailiff. He read it, then reread it. His face went from white to green. He looked at Bruno, who was shaking his head in denial. No, Bruno stammered. That was just for the tax benefits. We were going to change it. It was temporary. It's been 12 years, Mr. Sterling, the judge said. That doesn't sound temporary to me. He turned to Jessica. Mrs. Sterling, if you are indeed a 50% owner, then half of these hidden assets are legally yours already. Why are we here? Jessica smiled. It was the first time she had smiled all day. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just cornered her prey. Because, Your Honor, Jessica said, I'm not here to take half. I'm here to take all of it. The courtroom went silent. Bruno looked at her, confused. What are you talking about? Jessica opened her yellow legal pad. She had been taking notes the entire time, but now she flipped to a page near the back. It was filled with handwritten bullet points. Your Honor, Jessica said, I am invoking the fraud exception to partnership law. When one partner engages in fraudulent conduct that harms the partnership, the innocent partner is entitled to dissolution and full remediation. My husband has committed fraud against Sterling Dynamics by using company funds for personal enrichment. He has committed fraud against me by hiding our marital assets, and he has committed perjury by lying to this court. She looked at Bruno. Under New York partnership law, Section 69, I am entitled to dissolve the partnership and claim the full value of the company as damages. You tried to steal from me, Bruno, so now I'm taking everything. Bruno's lawyer was frantically flipping through a law book. He found the statute, he read it, he closed his eyes, and slumped in his chair. Your Honor, Silas said weakly, I need to request an immediate recess to consult with my client about potential settlement options. I bet you do, Judge Henderson said. He looked at Jessica with something that might have been respect. Mrs. Sterling, I am going to grant a 48-hour continuance. During that time, I am freezing all accounts associated with Sterling Dynamics and all offshore entities you've identified. Mr. Sterling, you are not to access, transfer, or otherwise touch a single dollar. If you do, I will hold you in contempt, and you will await the next hearing from a jail cell. Am I clear? Yes, Your Honor, Bruno whispered. He looked like a man who had just been hit by a truck. Court is adjourned, Henderson banged his gavel. As the room began to empty, Bruno sat in his chair, stunned. Jessica packed up her yellow legal pad and her plastic cup. She walked past Bruno's table. She paused, leaning down just close enough for him to hear. You should have just split it 50-50, Bruno, she whispered. Now you get nothing. She walked out of the courtroom, her head held high. Behind her, Bruno Sterling, the man who thought he had won, realized he had just lost everything to the woman he thought was too stupid to fight back. The 48-hour continuance was not a time of rest. It was a siege. Inside the glass tower of Sterling Dynamics, chaos reigned. The building, which had once been Bruno's monument to himself, now felt like a tomb. Every account was frozen. Every door was locked. And in the center of it all, Bruno Sterling paced his corner office like a caged animal. Silas Blackwood sat across from him, his tie loosened, his silver hair disheveled. He had spent the last 36 hours on the phone with forensic accountants, tax attorneys, and criminal defense lawyers. The picture they painted was grim. Bruno, Silas said, his voice hoarse, I'm going to be very clear with you. You are in serious trouble. Not just divorce trouble. Criminal trouble. I didn't do anything illegal, Bruno snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. Those offshore accounts are legitimate business structures. Plenty of CEOs use them. Plenty of CEOs don't lie to a judge about them. Silas shot back. You signed a financial affidavit under penalty of perjury. You swore you disclosed all marital assets. You didn't. That's fraud. Bruno, and Jessica has the receipts to prove it. Bruno slammed his fist on the desk. She had no right to take those files. I'll sue her for theft. She's a 50% owner of the company. Silas shouted, his patience finally breaking. She didn't steal anything. She documented her own property. And now she's going to take it all. Because you couldn't keep your hands out of the cookie jar. Bruno slumped into his chair. What do I do? Silas took a deep breath. You settle. You offer her 70%. You grovel. You beg. And you hope she doesn't press criminal charges. 70%? Bruno looked like he might vomit. That's everything. The company, the houses, the jets. Yes, Silas said flatly. It's everything. Because if you don't settle, she takes you to trial, and at trial, she presents all of this evidence to a jury. And then you don't just lose the company, you lose your freedom. The DA is already sniffing around. Bruno. Wire fraud carries 20 years. Bruno stared out the window at the city he once thought he owned. How did this happen? You underestimated her, Silas said. You thought she was a waitress. You thought she was weak. You forgot she's been running your books for a decade. She knew every number, every account, every lie. And she waited. She waited for the perfect moment to destroy you. There was a knock at the door. Bruno's assistant, the one who had replaced Jessica in more ways than one, poked her head in. Tiffany. She was young, blonde, and looked terrified. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice shaking. There's someone here to see you." She says it's urgent. "Who?" Bruno snapped. The door opened wider, and Jessica Sterling walked in. But she wasn't alone. Behind her was a man in a dark suit, carrying a briefcase. He had the look of a federal agent. "Hello, Bruno," Jessica said. She was no longer wearing the old dress. She was dressed in a sharp navy suit, her hair styled, her posture confident. She looked like the CEO she was about to become. "What is this?" Bruno demanded, standing up. "You can't be here. This is my office." "Actually," Jessica said, "as of this morning, it's our office. Or at least it was." She turned to the man beside her. "This is Agent Miller from the FBI. He has some questions for you." Agent Miller stepped forward, pulling out a badge. "Mr. Sterling, I'm here regarding your offshore accounts and the movement of funds through Sterling Dynamics. We've been investigating financial crimes in the logistics sector, and your name came up. Mrs. Sterling has been cooperative in providing documentation." Bruno's face went white. You turned me in." "I turned in a criminal," Jessica said coldly. "There's a difference, Your Honor." I, Bruno stammered, looking at Silas. Tell them she's lying." Silas just shook his head. "I'm sorry, Bruno. I can't represent you in a criminal matter. You need a different kind of lawyer now." Agent Miller opened his briefcase. "Mr. Sterling, I have a warrant here to seize all company records related to Blue Ocean Holdings, the Vanguard Trust, and any other entities you control. You are not under arrest at this time, but I strongly suggest you retain counsel. We'll be in touch." The agent left, leaving Jessica and Bruno alone. Tiffany had wisely disappeared. "Why?" Bruno asked, his voice breaking. "Why did you do this? We could have worked it out. I would have given you half. We could have just moved on." Jessica walked over to the window. She looked out at the city, the same view Bruno had enjoyed for years. "You want to know why?" she said, not turning around. "Because you didn't just cheat on me, Bruno. You humiliated me. You paraded your mistress in front of our friends. You told people I was nothing. You cut me off from my own money and left me to beg for scraps. You thought I was weak. You thought I was stupid. You thought I was disposable." She turned to face him, and there were no tears. Just cold, hard resolve. "I am not weak, Bruno. I am not stupid. And I am not disposable. I built this company as much as you did. I kept the books. I filed the taxes. I made sure you didn't go to prison when you cut corners. And this is how you repaid me." She walked to the desk and picked up a framed photo. It was their wedding picture. She looked at it for a moment, then set it down, face down. "I gave you a chance to be fair," Jessica said. "I would have settled for 50-50. But you offered me $50,000 and called me greedy. So now you get to see what greedy really looks like." She walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Bruno, Tiffany called me yesterday. She wants to testify against you in exchange for immunity. Apparently, she's not as loyal as you thought. Turns out, nobody is loyal to a sinking ship." Jessica walked out, leaving Bruno Sterling alone in his office, surrounded by the empire he had built and the ruins he had created. 2 weeks later, the final hearing was held. Bruno didn't show up. He had taken a plea deal, surrendering all marital assets to Jessica in exchange for her not pursuing criminal charges. He kept one house, the smallest one, and a small trust fund, enough to live on, but not enough to rebuild. Jessica walked into the courtroom one last time. Judge Henderson was there, and he smiled when he saw her. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, "I have reviewed the settlement agreement. It appears you are now the sole owner of Sterling Dynamics." "Yes, Your Honor," Jessica said. "I am." "And what do you plan to do with it?" Jessica thought for a moment. "I'm going to rename it. Sterling Dynamics is Bruno's name. I'm calling it Apex Logistics, and I'm going to run it the right way. No more shell companies. No more hidden accounts. Just honest business. Judge Henderson nodded. I think that's a fine plan, Mrs. Sterling. Or should I say, Ms. Russo? I see you filed to reclaim your maiden name. Yes, Your Honor, Jessica said. Jessica Russo. It's time to start fresh. The judge signed the final decree. Then this court declares the marriage of Bruno Sterling and Jessica Russo dissolved. All assets awarded to Ms. Russo. Case closed. Jessica walked out of the courthouse. The sun was shining. She felt lighter than she had in years. She had walked into that courtroom as a victim. She walked out as a victor. And Bruno Sterling? He learned the hardest lesson of all. You should never underestimate the person who knows where all the bodies are buried. Because one day, they might just dig them up.